From Clearwater.
um, yeah, hello from Clearwater. I made an observation just a minute ago that I don't feel like my day can really get started until I've made my bed
Oh,
or I've
yeah.
made the bed. Yeah. It's like every time I go by and it's like not made, I feel like, oh, can I get back in?
So you ran in there and just now made the bed? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I was just doing. And so it's like once the bed is made, then I can walk into the bedroom and it's like, no, I'm not going back to bed.
Yeah.
It is time to be up for the day and do the thing. And then everything just like starts off really nice. But I just, that's an observation I just made of, like a personal observation that my day really feels like it can get started once I've made my bed. I don't know.
We've been married for a good while, and I'm still learning things about you. That's amazing.
There's
everyone.
the Michelle fun fact for the day.
So I might remind everybody who's joining, we haven't explained this in a while. On StreamYard, our streaming platform, we can only see your name if you allow Facebook. If you're in Facebook, I'm not sure about the other platforms, but you have to allow StreamYard to share your name. So when you say good morning, we can't always see who's saying good morning. So if you just let us know, and also if you're listening in this morning, please let us know what state you're listening from. That's always fun for us to get a feel for. And we're still waiting for Hawaii to tune in. I've been
we've
watching
got a
and
really
waiting.
good discount for Discovery visit.
So you know somebody in Hawaii,
for
it's in the buy here, pay here business.
Yeah,
get us connected.
It's like, I think that we'd probably pretty much so do travel costs.
I am prepared to be very flexible. So yeah,
Jim's like, just don't make any
commitment. Yeah, put it out there in the worldwide interweb.
Good morning, Tyler.
Yeah. Hey, Tyler Simmons. Thought about you this week. So Tyler, we had a little conversation inside one of our Facebook groups, and we talked about this subject of the 9 E's. So this is an old document that I created years ago around collections training and kind of introductory education. And so we're kind of going to step into that today, Tyler. So I appreciate he mentioned the word empathy in the context of collections. And I said, Tyler, I never hear anybody else use that word in the context of buy here, pay here collections. And so, let's keep in mind when we're listening to Tyler Simmons, we're talking about somebody who's in the family who is the national quality dealer of the year.
Yeah.
And he's using the word empathy in the context of collections. And so that should give folks some insight about how things work and how you stay in business for the long term. So that's part of what we want to talk about today. Is our White Hat Wednesday theme is going to be collections and how to do that in a white hat way.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, Michelle, we've talked to a number of people in recent weeks who are, we're always being approached by people who, have a solution for dealers or this and that. And so we've talked to a couple of people who have collections solutions, and we're hopeful that we're going to be finding some folks who are willing to cooperate with us on this, developing this white hat track of collections, if you will, because we know there are folks out there who collect, but do they collect using the principles and the practices that we recommend? Because we're playing the long game over here. So we know we want money in the bank, of course, and we want the customer to make those payments, but we're really playing a long game. And so that's a different approach. So that's kind of the lead in, I think, for what we're going to be talking about.
Can we do announcements before we actually start?
Right. Go ahead.
Good morning, Bill. So there's a smattering of things that are happening soon with different conferences. We got FIADA in Orlando. That's going to be the 2nd through the 4th of October. And Arizona Finance Conference is going to be October 29th.
8th. Yeah, I think we speak on Sunday the 30th.
I actually need to change my calendar because I block off the dates that include our travel. So it's like the weekend of the 28th. And then the Buy Here Pay Here Super Forum is coming up in November,
correct,
around the 9th. So there's a couple of things. There's one other thing that we just kind of wanted to give you a little bit more of a teaser. Remember how we've been telling you, please mark off a date on your calendar, which would be October 19th. It's a Wednesday. And so we also said, hey, we're going to be in Pennsylvania on this day. Well, we're going to give you a little bit more. We don't have an agenda per
Mhm.
se yet.
We have a tentative one.
We have a
in the
tentative
works.
agenda, but we're going to be doing like a 2/3 day event in Pennsylvania
Mhm.
at Tommy Brandis's dealership,
Quakertown,
Quakertown,
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, and there will be multiple sessions, and all of them will be live
Yeah.
with video.
So that's something you've not seen in Buy Here Pay Here. And Tommy was kind enough to invite us up, and we're going to actually set up at his dealership on a
Mhm.
White Hat Wednesday, and we're going to broadcast. We'll do multiple sessions. We'll have dealers part of the topics, part of the conversation. We'll have some dealers present, at the site, and we'll be broadcasting live. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It will be. And I'd like to know who's listening from the runway. Someone's about ready to get on a plane. All I see is a Facebook user. So
Oh yeah.
I love that you're like, oh, I want to just get as much of this out of this as I possibly can. So,
Right.
so thank you for listening, runway listener.
Mhm.
So yeah, October 19th, set it your day aside, try to keep your calendar just a little bit free if you're interested in listening in, because we will be starting with the morning show at 9 a.m. Eastern, and then we'll be going into about a 2/3 of the day of different sessions that will be live individually, and we will likely be broadcasting all of those live on Buy Here Pay Here Success and YouTube for sure. We need to just talk to some of the other people and see. Oh, that's Mike Downey. Hey, Mike.
Oh, hey, Mike Downey.
Thank you, runway listener Mike Downey.
Right.
So yeah, keep that available. And so yeah, that's the end of announcements.
Very cool.
Okay.
So now we're going to talk about collections.
Now we're going to talk about
Okay,
collections.
cool. So yeah, so there's just a lot of foundational stuff that we teach on collections. And I think, we've talked about how sometimes when dealers are new and they're asking questions about this and that, and in this case, we're talking collections, I find myself answering questions with questions. Some of you have heard me say that before. And so often in collections, I really start from a really foundational place. It's like we have to really decide about philosophy and principles and how we want to be known in the community, and all those kind of things are really kind of foundational to how I would answer questions about how you want to approach lots of things in collections. And for today, I want to make sure that we kind of explain further something we've touched on in the past, which is how collections is really tied back to all the things before the customer ever takes delivery and is asked to make their first payment. There's so much that we do in a Buy Here Pay Here life cycle of a deal that affect the collections process and lead to success. So why don't we just start there?
So this is kind of like pre-collections, but it's collections because it's about setting the foundation, and it's that if you're really mindful of these things, then you will be helping your collectors in the long run.
Yeah, and we talk about that. We often talk about how, we advise that the collections team play a role in the decision to approve. Doesn't mean they'll have, final decision making, but they will play a role in contributing to the decision.
One of the things we've seen happen with multiple dealers without playing a role is that maybe the collections manager is part of the underwriting decision.
Right.
So that they can take a look at it and go, oh, okay, yeah, this is not a good loan.
Or they bring a different set of eyes, ways to, it's not necessarily to say no on the deal, but to ways to strengthen it. Like because they bring a collector set of eyes, and they know they're going to have ownership of this contract for 3-4 years, whatever. And so that just means they're going to bring that set of eyes to the deal. So that's an example. But I think, I don't want to belabor it because I know we've talked about it before, but basically all the things that starting with when we buy a car, like how we buy, how much effort we put into buying, and the condition of the cars that we acquire.
So let's talk about that for just a second.
Sure.
So buying, how does buying help?
Well, when we really are thorough in our evaluation at the point of buying, then we're obviously, and this is obviously hard. I always tell people it's one of the hardest parts of the business is finding decent cars, that have miles and, that will last a note, obviously with good maintenance, whatever. But it's like putting the effort into the buying side. And then obviously we have the next step. Once we get it to the lot and we bought it, we have to evaluate the cars thoroughly and make, good thorough assessment of the cars and make sure they're really, in fact, have a chance for success. Because again, we know it's widely known that if the car's not running, customer doesn't want to make their payments, and so that's the nature of this business. So that means that and it affects collections. When the car's not running, the collectors will tell you, if we lined them all up, they will say when the car's a problem, the customer doesn't want to make the payments.
So that's kind of like with that buying help thing.
Mhm.
The buying help part of this is that when you're buying, try to buy cars that will last 3 years at
Yeah,
least.
and I think
And
most people
yeah,
know that.
yeah,
It's
we
just
know
that
that.
they rush through it,
So
and so that's where we start to, when we shortcut and we kind of move cars through because we're in a hurry, to get our inventory full or whatever, then that's where we shouldn't be surprised if we create a problem on the collection side. If our
mhm,
cars are, not in good condition and they're starting
mhm.
to fail, early on, that's an indication that we create a problem in collections.
So we bought the car, and what kind of things with the evaluation? You said you're going to be doing an assessment of
Oh,
the car once it
I think the
lands.
biggest thing is that means getting some real time in the car. Like, of course, your mechanics are going to raise the hood and they're going to do their diagnostic checks, and that means plugging in, all their equipment and running through their diagnostic. But I'm talking about driving the cars till they get good and warm, and that's often the harder part, is making enough road time to get out and actually drive the car until it gets thoroughly warm, and that we get a chance to determine if there's something wrong. And some of us will say, well, we can't make time to do that. Really? You're going to put a customer in a 3-year note or a 4-year note, and
Yeah.
you can't make,
I mean, is that something that you think? I mean, you don't maybe not necessarily a mechanic. Could like a porter do something like that?
sure.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting a little deeper in the
Okay.
weeds in terms of those kind of things. I think the point that we're really trying to make is that all the things that we do on the sales and collection side and the inventory management side, to a degree, right up to obviously underwriting, has a huge impact on
Mhm.
collections. And so really what we're saying is, let's first recognize, and you've been there when we've had conversations with clients recently, where we
Mhm.
said one of the first things we want to do is evaluate the process of, leading up to the delivery. How do we um, set ourselves up for success on the collection side
Okay.
and stop any bleeding? Like, if we're continuing to put problem contracts in the portfolio, then we're going to
Okay,
continue to
so
have problems
we've
with
we've covered
collections.
the car part.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
So it's like, it's the buying and the warming up and making sure
Mhm.
that it's been so now you have a car
Mhm.
that is we feel good about putting on the lot. So
Right.
this is like the next piece
Right.
of what we do to help
Yeah, and
collections.
quickly before we leave that car piece, I would just say that one of the things I have shared with people, and I saw some conversations on Facebook in the last week or so that kind of supported the same idea, which is, I used to say 3 months. Like, I would say, if you have a problem with a customer or a car, you'll know typically within the first 3 months. So
Mhm.
some other people on Facebook had different time frames, 5 to 6 months, whatever. But it's like, the point is, if you send out a problem car, even though you got a good customer, well qualified customer,
You're going to hear about it.
yeah, if
Yeah.
you got to send a problem car, you're going to know typically within the first 3 months. And then same thing would be true even if you put them in a good car and the customer's a problem, you're going to typically know, fairly soon. So the point is, if we get past that window, then we position ourselves to have some success.
Mhm.
And so that's why I say that, the car's important. The underwriting is obviously vital, and so I think it's just important to first understand, if we're having problems with collections, let's start back there. Let's don't, people tend to jump to what's wrong with my pay plans with my collectors, or, whatever. It's like,
Mhm.
well, okay, we can certainly talk about that, but why don't we look first at all the stuff? What kind of contracts are we feeding the collection
Mhm.
department? Okay.
Okay, so it's on the lot, and
Hmm.
now someone comes on the lot and is looking for
Hmm.
a specific vehicle. What are the kind of things that a salesperson can do before we get to underwriting to help collections be
That's an
more
important
successful?
one. So getting back
Yeah.
to the thing with Tyler, I shared with him that I was going to share these 9 E's. So the
Hmm.
first E is enable. Okay. And this is where the salespeople start to play a role. Is if you so enable, when we think of enabling, the way we hear that in context, most recently, is kind of in this context of addiction or somebody that's got
So This
destructive
this this is
behaviors.
this is the other side of the spectrum. This is
Yeah.
the positive
Right. So it's
enabling,
like, we're
enabling
not
for
talking about
success.
enabling in a negative way.
Yeah.
We're talking about enabling success. So if somebody got a better word for that, I'm open to replacing the word. But enable
It just
just
needs to
simply,
start with an E.
yeah, yeah, that's right. We just need to. We're just talking about creating a platform to allow the customer a chance to be successful.
Mhm.
So to your question about salesperson, to me, that's really hinged is on this idea that I see as an example, and this is also the salespeople just working what they've been asked to work. Is one of the things we see quite a lot is dealers aiming for a certain term of a loan. And so they're going to have their system default to a 48-month term or whatever that
And if
looks
it
like.
does, yeah, okay.
And so when the salesperson starts into the process, the system defaults to 48 and we negotiate with the customer down payment. Obviously, we're trying to get as much as
High
we
price of
can.
cars, what happens?
Well, what
Correct.
that means
Yeah.
is that at shorter term, the payment goes up, right? If we're trying to fit it into a specific term. And here's one of the things that I feel like is fundamental about our business that, we just don't have enough people talk about this is that the customer that we finance is in a tough spot. They will accept a high payment if we tell them we can solve their transportation problem and we slide out a quote or a contract that says, good news, I can solve your transportation problem today with your $1,000 down. Here's your payment. Here's the car that you like, that's clean and has, reasonable miles, whatever. Here's your payment. They're going to accept it, even though they'll have to figure out next month if they can really afford it.
And it's that whole thing that we kind of talked about before about, well, it's about justifying your actions.
Yeah.
I can do this. You're in a tight spot.
Mhm.
And so you're thinking, okay, in your mind, I can do this. I can make it work. I can do this. I
Right.
can make it work. I can figure out how to make this work. And you just don't want to put your customer in that kind of position.
Yeah. And so I think this is a big disconnect that I feel like you and I see. I've certainly seen it a ton in my career. And the reason I really harp on this is because we see collectors struggling to get payments in the bank from a customer who's really just, and of course, fuel prices up and all these kind of things.
Mhm.
And so it's tough for them to manage this high payment. Again, the customer will accept the payment because, and especially if I'm a good salesperson closer, I can put the contract in front of them and they'll agree to sign the contract. So, most of the experts out there, the Brent Carmichaels of the world and all these folks who, have been in this space a long time, they lean heavily on ability. Does the customer have the ability to pay?
And that's a very different thing. Yeah.
It's kind of like this PTI thing that everybody talks about, which that's payment to income ratio. So typically people look at that on a net income, really, whichever way you look at it. We're used to looking at net. But you say, okay, this customer, we'd like to keep this customer's payment in a certain range of, percentage of their income. Well, that goes back to ability. And it also ties to what I would later as we move into the collection side of this deeper is that in order for me to have success in collecting, I I need to start from a place of knowing that the payment is really something a customer can manage.
Mhm.
Okay.
Because I mean, how awful would it be as a collector? It's like, oh my gosh, they just approved something that's $600 a month, and
Yeah, and the customer's income is not going to support that.
yeah,
And good
yeah,
news, we sold a car, but doggone it, I'm going to be,
it's gonna
struggling to.
be,
It's going to be a
yeah,
struggle all the way
like
through. So
blood out of a turnip. It's
yeah,
gonna be hard.
it's going to be
Yeah.
so it's like whatever the numbers are, it's like
Uh-huh.
we want to make sure the customer has the ability to manage whatever that payment is that we choose.
Mhm.
So again, looking relative to income, and obviously we get into this thing about verifying income, but the key point is whatever that income ratio needs to look like, I need to be, as a collector, I need to know that the customer can, in fact, afford the payment that we've chosen, that we've agreed
Mhm.
to, because
Mhm.
my job is to hold them accountable to the terms of this contract. And I can do that differently when I know that this does fit within. It was agreed. We agreed. We established this again. Part of the reason the
Mhm.
collection team can be involved in these decisions because we agreed at the time, this is a payment that you can manage. We talked about it because it is on the upper range of what we're comfortable with. So we talked about it. We made sure, and now I can enforce that more consistently, right?
Mhm.
So I need to be able to do that as a collector. I need to be in that position. Whereas if the customer is, it's a stretch, then it puts me in a difficult place. I know I'm fighting against something that's just, it's
Mhm.
just math. I mean,
Mhm.
every customer we have out there's got a cell phone bill, they got a grocery bill, they got to get back and forth to work, they got
Yeah.
fuel. I mean, the reality is we're fighting a fight that is just a struggle. And
Can we talk just a second about that? And I know that there's been in the past it's like this is the sweet spot for most buy here, pay here customers.
mhm,
That it's typically around a $400 and we're kind of seeing it creep up a little bit to about a $450 or something like that a month payment.
That's with our clients. I would say
Yeah.
across the industry that number might
Okay.
vary, but yeah, with our clients, we're typically seeing their payments run in the 425
And
average
that's
range.
fitting within what kind of PTI?
Right. That's typically going to be. Now, I don't see the income side of. We're
Mhm.
seeing the performance report, so we're only seeing the DMS. So we don't see the income of that customer. But with most of the clients we work with, that's going to be up to about 25% of net income. And that's we like to see it closer to 20. And certainly we see customers get approved with ratios lower than that. But that's kind of been the strategy throughout my career. And I think our friends, the good folks at Neo, their data really recommends a PTI of 25% or less. There can be circumstances where it can make sense to go a little higher, but
so it's where I'm going with that though is that typically what we've seen with our customers is that most buy here pay here customers can that's a sweet spot for a lot of them. So that goes back to the buying again of the car is like, are you buying a car that can last if you extend the term too?
Yeah. So that's the other piece we kind of glazed over is I think that when we talk about enabling the customer for success, I'm really saying we're going to obviously negotiate for as much down payment as we can get, whatever's manageable for the customer without putting them behind on the rent that's due in a week or whatever. We're going to get as much down payment as we can get. And because that obviously reduces our cash exposure, regardless of what it says about the performance of the loan. We know it's going to help reduce our cash exposure and help us buy more cars, replace inventory. So there's that. And then we're going to, and it represents commitment from the customer, right? And now we're going to negotiate the payment. So now we have positioned the customer to be successful. And one last quick thing is I think we ought to talk more about PTVI. And I just thought of that just now. It's like it's payment to verifiable income. Yeah. Because the customer just claims an income, that doesn't.
That's one of the things that I really appreciate with when I get into some of our customers' Neo accounts, and it's like, oh, the income just shifted. Oh, and as they're going through and verifying things, it's like, okay, so the income just shifted. This is going to shift what they can really afford. Yeah. And it's kind of fun to watch these things happen in real time.
Well, that shows that people are verifying, right? They're actually going through a step and verifying, and there's some automated, some ways to connect to bank accounts and this and that. But you get the point. It's like we're at a place where the customer's payment is set in a way that is manageable. And now we can move toward closing the loan in a way that's more consistent, firm,
And I have a question, and I don't know if you feel like this actually fits into this setting the customer up for success with collections. Is one of the things that we talk to our clients about is having the customer do an independent mechanics check. Does that play into that a little bit about like, this is yours?
It does.
And so like changing the psychology, we know they can afford it. And we've, what we've encouraged our clients to do is there's a form that we use and stuff. And it's like, okay, so while we're getting all of these things done and verifying all of these things, we want you to take the car to an independent mechanic and have them check it.
That's a new concept for a lot of people who might be listening today. So that's something that's some are going to say that's very old school. Those of us who are old with the gray hair have been around this business for 20 plus years. I say what some people call old school, I would call fundamental. And so I think it's something that we can and we would benefit from making the time.
Well, and I see two things that happen with that. One is it's buying your underwriting and verification team a little bit of time. And two, it's giving the customer time in the car where they're having someone outside of the dealership. So it's like, this is going to be a good vehicle for me and my family. And it's not just the dealer that's saying, this is a car that's gonna, we actually encourage people to never say this is a good car, or just say this is a vehicle. You make the choice. We've inspected this and all of that, but then they have an outside person take a look at it and then it kind of changes their level of ownership.
So that's the third thing. I think you talked about time. It gives them a little time, and that's where I was kind of. The third thing in that is that it does create some level of mental ownership.
Hmm.
It has them know that they're responsible. And sometimes, look, there can be a warranty, not or not. We really still want the customer to accept ownership, because
Hmm.
having a warranty just means the car is going to get repaired under the the
Yeah.
warranty you know parameters, but it doesn't mean the car's not going to break
Yeah,
down.
well, but I mean, can imagine it as a collector, the way the conversation shifts from you guys sold me a bad car
Sure.
or whatever to you had it inspected.
Right.
And so, how can we help you get this? Is there something we can do to help you get this fixed? But you had it inspected,
Right.
and so we not knowingly gave you a car that was not, and then we also asked you to look
Right.
and have this inspected. So, what can we do? How can we help?
Yeah. So this is all part of, we really strongly encourage that mechanical inspection.
Can I say that one of the things that Jim has had to try to teach me and train me to not say is, well, you really need to do this or you have to do this. He's like, we strongly advise. And if it's one of those things that it's like, oh, danger, Will Robinson,
Mhm.
it's we strongly, maybe
Mhm.
even strongly
Mhm.
advise
Yeah.
that you do this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And
So
I
when you
have
say strongly
yeah.
advise, it's like,
Yeah. And I grew up in cattle country. I have a cattle prod in my suitcase, or my, if we need to go there. No, it's like, this is something that we highly recommend, just because
uh-huh.
it has lasting impact. So,
Hmm.
as I always say in training, like, having the customer take the car and get it independently checked out does not keep the car from breaking down. They might go through that process and the car might still break down in 2 weeks. What it changes is the dynamic of that relationship. And I think this is true even when there's a warranty, because again, when there's
Hmm.
a warranty, that doesn't keep the car from breaking down.
Hmm.
Customer's still frustrated. Yes, the repairs are going to be covered, but I'm 2 weeks in with this car. It's given me problems. It's left me stranded. I'm frustrated. I want out of this car. So it's like, yes, those things you just mentioned are true. And that's very frustrating, Mr. Customer or Mrs. Customer. The
Hmm.
reality is, I don't even typically have to say it. If I'm on the collection side of that or the general manager side of that conversation, without even saying it, the customer's aware that they took it and had it independently checked out, which, what, if we think about what that really means, it means that the customer knows that I didn't knowingly. That's a big
Exactly.
difference. I didn't
Exactly.
knowingly send them
That's
home in
that
that car.
psychological
Right,
thing.
right.
Yeah.
So it's like it changes the dynamic and it increases our ability to resolve that problem. So that's the part that I would say is really
Okay.
vital. And so now we are enabling the customer to be successful. We are enabling the collectors to be successful.
Hmm.
And so obviously there's underwriting and the whole approval process, right?
So, I mean, these, what all we're going to really be talking on today are all of the things that happen prior to that
Mhm.
deal being booked.
Right, right.
And so this is like, I think that you put number one,
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
And so we'll have other ones that we're going to talk about collections, but these are all of the things that are prior
Mhm.
to the deal actually getting booked.
Mhm.
And so let me just kind of go down the list.
Mhm.
And so we'll just first one is making sure that you're buying vehicles that
Mhm.
will potentially last
Sure.
for the term of the loan. Second is that evaluation piece.
Mhm.
And one of the things that you strongly advised,
Mhm. There you go.
is that each car get driven to where it's nice and warm.
Mhm.
And so from there, you're going to be able to determine a lot more about the car once
Mhm.
it's nice and warm. And so, finding a porter, whatever it is, but
Give it a
taking
chance to overheat if it's
give
going to
it the
overheat.
chance to overheat if it's going to overheat. And then so the car is on the lot. So
Mhm.
we've got good buying practices, the
Mhm.
evaluation, making sure that we've done all of the things.
Mhm.
The car is on the lot, that you're in the sales process now is you are making sure that they fit your parameters,
Mhm.
and that we're not trying to get them into a vehicle that is outside of what they can handle, that they
Mhm.
can with some comfort
Mhm.
handle this vehicle, the payment and all of that underwriting or the approval process. It's really, we strongly advise, this is another strongly advise, that collections be part of underwriting.
Yeah, it's just
And
it's an important recommendation, I think, and
mhm.
there's sometimes a little maneuvering that has to be
Yeah.
done to get people in position to do that. And you say, well, my collection team too busy to be involved in underwriting, and I think, well, I follow that, but I also think that that's an
Mhm.
investment
Yeah.
that can make sense in
Yeah.
terms of the ownership of and
Mhm.
attitude of the entire collections team when they feel like they've got
They've
a voice
had
at the
some,
table,
yeah, exactly.
right?
And that's when we've done some consulting, and then there's like a level of conflict. It's
Mhm.
like in a family, so and
Mhm.
so's get whatever, that there's a level of conflict. This is one way of really helping bridge sales and collections.
Yeah.
And then the final thing on there was we strongly advise that you think about starting up the practice of doing an independent mechanical evaluation.
Yeah, and there's one more that kind of ties into the next step, so we'll cover that in more depth soon. And by the way, some of you say, "Well, what are the 9Es? Give us the whole." You're going to have to
You're gonna
subscribe to the YouTube channel. You got to subscribe to the YouTube channel to get all
Mwah,
these.
mwah,
Yeah,
mwah.
yeah. So we'll be sharing those in the weeks to come. But I would say the other thing that happens now is that we start to shift over into the education piece, which is really happens at closing. Is how we close the thing, how we
Yeah.
hand off, and the customer takes delivery, and how we continue that education process to reinforce the things that we have taught in terms of expectations.
Yeah. So, like, the closing is kind of like that little bridge between the pre-booking
Mhm.
and to where you book
Yeah.
and to where it gets actually passed off to collections, is that closing, the
Right.
actual closing process. And I think that might be worth actually having a little bit more of an expanded conversation about that closing process and the education piece
Uh-huh.
for the customer. I
I
think
kind of
that
put it in the
yeah.
under the umbrella of education. I put, expectations could be the
Yeah.
10th E.
Yeah,
You could make
exactly.
E, but I'm just saying there it's in the context of education. It's like setting
Yeah.
expectations, and so we'll talk about education,
Yeah.
how to hand off to the collections department and make for a smooth and successful handoff to a long relationship with the collection department. So we'll get there, but I think it's really just we're trying to go from a really foundational place. If we build all of our collection practices on these kind of foundational ideas, then we're
Mhm.
going to have more success.
So, all right. So, everyone, this is the pre-booking, basically, all the things that we suggest that you do to really help set
Mhm.
your collectors up for success. And it hasn't even gotten in front of a collector,
Right.
unless it's like the collection manager that's helping with
Mhm.
underwriting.
Right.
So, and then we'll be having more of these, and
Right.
we're going to be talking about collections. And it seems to be something that a lot of our clients are, help. How can give us little tips that
Certainly.
might be able to help. So this is just the first part of that.
Yep.
Um,
So we'll wrap up by just reminding everybody, put on the calendar. We'd love to have you tune in on October 19th
Yep.
at Tommy's Place. We'll be at Tommy
Mhm.
Brandis dealership in Quakertown, Pennsylvania. We'll be broadcasting live. We have several topics already mapped out. We've got a number of dealers who have expressed an interest in being there in person. And then, of course, we'll be bringing in folks live, remotely as well. So it's
Yes.
going to be a fun day.
Yeah. And then just to let you know that Friday is we've got Emily from Pay Near Me. It's going to be Pay Near Me
Uh-huh.
is going to be joining us and talking about a survey. So that's this coming Friday,
Mhm.
talking about some surveys that they've done about why people pay late, how they like to pay, that kind of thing. And so
Good.
we're going to be having a conversation with her. Again, just to remind you that we are a no pitch zone.
Mhm.
Um, uh,
We'll have the buttons ready.
We'll have the
If
buttons
Emily starts to
ready.
pitch, then
Yep.
we can.
Yeah, we'll have the buttons ready. The mwah mwah mwah,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But so tune in on Friday if you want to understand a little bit more about the psychology about how your customers want to pay based on some good research that was done by Pay Near Me.
Right. Very good.
All right.
We
Well,
hope you're
have
enjoying the
yourself.
content. Let
Yeah.
us know. Speak up. Let us hear from you.
All right. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we will see you on Friday.